Don't know if you can see that, but the water tower says City of Frederick. How do, everybody? I am here in Frederick, and I'm in a special place. I just left the well, I just left another special place. I just left the National Museum for Civil War Medicine. So 2 videos were just taken there and probably posted first. This is William Barry, friend of the deaf. Just to reiterate something, sometimes when I'm in a certain town or a certain location, I'll take a couple videos and I'll post them at different times. So please don't think that I wear the same clothes for weeks or for months on end, okay? I just took 2 videos at the Civil War Museum of Medicine, and those will probably post before this one. So yep, I'm wearing the same clothes because these were shot in the same afternoon. But so you just saw a statue devoted to Mr. Barry, a lifelong friend of the deaf. But the point of being here is because this is all that remains of basically 2 things. This building here, oh, there's a sign we can read on here before we get to the park signs. Let me just walk up to here and let you get a screenshot if you want. It's going to be hard to read. Okay, these barracks mark the course of the struggle for American independence, built in 1777 by the British and Hessian prisoners of the Revolutionary War. Here were detained those taken at the battles of Saratoga, Trenton, and Yorktown. Also, French prisoners captured from the frigate Insurgent by the United States Constellation, etc., etc. So, this place served 2 purposes in previous centuries. At first, it was the barracks where the Hessian troops were kept. Of course, they were the German mercenaries that the British hired to try and help them win the war. Getting back to another point, I want to stress this again. The Germans were hired twice by the power state. I know it's a little confusing the way I'm putting this, but the British the United States is a colony. Let's never forget that. Never forget that the United States was and is still a colony. So let me just put that out there. Having said that, the power state, okay, not necessarily the Federals or the Union or the Americans, okay, but the power state who finally gained a foothold in this nation of ours, first hired German Hessians to fight us in the Revolutionary War, and then again to put down the insurgency in the Civil War, because many troops fighting for the Union, in some places 25% of Union soldiers were German immigrants. Of course, also many other folks, some black soldiers, you know, of course, at one point in the war, and so on and so forth, some Irish, but the German representation is by far the strongest, and I think that's very significant for people to consider, because they fought for the power state, the colonialists, right? They fought for them on both occasions. It may seem like we're talking about different armies or different good guy, bad guy. No, we're talking about the same people. We're talking about the same power state, okay? So once that's out here, I'm just going to go paragraph by paragraph, so you can stop and pause and come back if you like. I just had a little issue where this just stopped taping all of a sudden on its own. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. So here is, of course, like I said, the background on the earlier part of the history of this building. But the second part is that these became the hospital. I'm sorry, let me come back here. This became the field hospital, or general hospital, I'm sorry, number 1 here in Frederick. Now, there were about 40 official hospitals on the record, established hospitals here in Frederick. This whole place was one big hospital, which speaks largely to the horror and the incredible amount of dead and wounded who needed to be either interned or treated after the Battle of South Mountain, after the Battle of Antietam, and after the Battle of Gettysburg. Again, I've addressed some of this, and it gets a little confusing, okay, as far as where some prisoners went, whether they were, you know, because some Union prisoners went here, some Union prisoners went there. Likewise, some of the dead, I'm sorry, you know what I'm trying to say. Some of the Confederate prisoners went here, and some Confederate prisoners were buried elsewhere. You know, for obvious reasons. Again, after Antietam, for example, Union folks set up a big, nice cemetery, of course, nearby, to bury the soldiers the Union soldiers who fought in Antietam. However, they still had a lot of disdain for the Confederate soldiers from the conflict, so they put them in a little corner in Mount Olivet Cemetery, which is also here in Frederick. But this building is pretty much all that remains of both the Hessian Barracks and the General Hospital number 1 here in Frederick. So this building is very significant, and unfortunately it is all that remains of a much larger complex and system. Just give you a couple screenshots here. This place was a real junction. I've talked about junctions. I always talk about junctions. And much like in my couple Harper's Ferry videos that I've taken recently. Can I get some light here, please? Jesus. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. So yeah, this whole area was you know, crisscrossed quite often, you know, multiple times, just like Harper's Ferry was, because we're basically talking about the same path of movement of troops. Basically the three what Civil War historians kind of call the 3 Maryland campaigns. You know, of course, again, the first, there's one that I left out, but I've mentioned in other videos. So you know, you had the Antietam campaign, then you had them crossing through Maryland on their way to Gettysburg, and then in 1864 we had one more crossing or passing through this town at Monocacy, and each time, of course, thousands upon thousands of troops were hospitalized, were killed or hospitalized for various reasons. Many were hospitalized, of course, for injuries and limbs falling off and stuff like that. But many, and I mentioned this in the last videos in the Museum of Civil War Medicine. Let you get a screenshot here. That many of the soldiers who need to be treated weren't treated for their wounds. They were treated for sickness. They were treated for disease. They were treated for, you know, scourge, scurvy, dysentery, you know, you name it, all the way up to smallpox and so on and so forth. So the hospital system eventually grew to, and I mentioned this in the last video, the hospital system grew to officially about 40 or so, I think maybe 42 hospitals in the city of Frederick alone. It was one great hospital, and that just again speaks to how awful this conflict is, how many injured there were, how many maimed there were, and how many sick there were. As I mentioned in the last video, which hopefully you guys saw, there were other debilitating issues from soldiers who were involved in this conflict, and a lot of that was mental. If you can imagine the horrors of war, many of the soldiers came out of this war changed, not the same, and in a very miserable state, oftentimes physically, but oftentimes emotionally and spiritually as well. This war shattered people. It shattered our nation. That should never be forgotten. The point of all of my videos and all of my Civil War talks, I hope by now is clear. War is not good, okay? That kind of goes without saying, but moreover, despite which side you sit on, despite who you interpret as being the good or the bad guys, the end result is a shattered nation, a fragmented society, fragmented neighborhoods, fragmented states, fragmented families. God forbid, what we're dealing with right now, I've already addressed this, we're not going to have, you know, another conflict like we did here in the middle 19th century, but God forbid we ever have anything even remotely like it. And that's my point of all these videos, and hopefully a lot of you have seen the videos that I took at the Civil War Medicine Museum, because that is one of my favorite places regarding the Civil War in the region, you know, in Maryland, Virginia, and in Pennsylvania, because unlike all of the other sites that you can go to, which glorify the Union or glorify war in general, lionize generals and so on and so forth, here in Frederick, it brings it home very, very clear, front and center, that this was the most awful thing that anybody could ever imagine. And it seems very far removed now, but what do they say about history, guys? There you go. It repeats itself. It repeats itself in different ways sometimes, but it always repeats itself. And God forbid that we get anywhere close. I mean, in any way, shape, or form. I'm not just talking about dead, wounded, sick, you know, that sort of traditional, you know, image of war. But, you know, even again, the fracturing of a nation, the fracturing of a society, the fracturing of families who have family, you know, in both north and south, or both on the left and the right. God forbid we ever end up anywhere close to that again. So I just wanted to give folks a little look at the barracks. This is unfortunately all that remains, but it is very important, and I'm very, very glad that this small piece is still left here. I just passed 10 minutes, guys, so I'm gonna keep it moving and take a little one more video in these same clothes that may post at a later date, walking around downtown Frederick a little bit. But until the next one, guys, I will see you later.